You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the editor-in-chief of nationalworld.com, Nancy Fielder, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Anita Boateng. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Sunday Telegraph reports that right-wing Tory MPs are using Penny Mordaunt as a ploy to replace the Prime Minister, according to Rishi Sunak's allies. According to The Observer, senior Conservatives Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg and Sir David Davis have described a reported plot to force Rishi Sunak out of Number 10 before the next election as mad and bonkers. Though, if the Sunday Express is to be believed, the Tories might not be the only ones trying to unseat the Prime Minister. Their headline, Farage plots Sunak's demise. The Sunday Times reveals that Defence Secretary Grant Shapps cancelled part of his Ukraine trip this past week following a credible missile threat. The Mail on Sunday criticises a euthanasia campaign which referenced the car crash that killed Princess Diana. Speaking to the Sunday Mirror, Strictly Come Dancing's Giovanni Panice expresses his disappointment that actress Amanda Abbington withdrew from the last series for personal reasons. And The Star continues its fascination with the subject of which people make the best romantic partners. This time, it's men who wear Y-fronts. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Nancy Fielder and Anita Boateng. Welcome to you both. Let us start with politics, shall we? And the threats, real or otherwise, to Rishi Sunak's leadership. Let's have a look at The Observer. And as we said, running through the newspapers, we've got senior Tories saying that it's absolutely bonkers, quote, that there should be a plot to replace Rishi Sunak. Is it bonkers, Nancy?
I mean, the whole party's gone bonkers, hasn't it? And has been that way for quite a long time. So seemingly this is a plot not led by Penny Mordaunt herself, but by other people who think they need to get Rishi out as quickly as they can. But then there are quotes in there saying, well, she would be the shortest ever serving Prime Minister, shorter than what we had fairly recently. We all remember was just there for a few weeks. It just seems their back is against the wall. All the polls show that there's going to be an absolute landslide against the Conservatives, and they're desperately scrabbling around. Now, Penny Mordaunt herself thinks that this is people who don't like her within the party who are sort of setting her up to fail so that when she makes a proper bid for the leadership, again, let's not forget she's done this before, she might be less successful because this would tarnish her whole reputation. It's just a mess, and this is not just the party in a mess, it's the country, because they're supposed to be leading us, and instead they are backstabbing school children.
Anita, do you think it's credible that Penny Mordaunt doesn't know anything about this alleged grouping around her?
Yeah, I think that it is very plausible that she's not driving any of this. I mean, I've been watching leadership contests for a very long time and manoeuvres behind the scenes, and there's never been a credible one that kind of first appears on the front pages of any newspaper. So I think that there is something to some of the coverage that suggests this is a sort of double and triple bluff with members of certain parts of the party letting it be known that they wouldn't mind Penny Mordaunt in order to get other members of the party that do like Penny Mordaunt on board with the idea of a contest. So I think that, Nancy makes a point around, well, the Conservatives are in government. I don't think anyone who's mentioned around any of these papers is anywhere close to government. I think this is a lot of backbenchers, or a few backbenchers actually, having a few conversations about what if we threw everything up in the air and could you do this and could you do that, and, four-dimensional chess. And it actually is just a kind of newspaper distraction from the kinds of things that I'm sure are on Sunak and Hunt's mind as they get into this quite tricky period for the government.
Yeah, Nancy, the article saying that several Conservative MPs are maintaining that Penny Mordaunt has been on manoeuvres for months, making clear she'd be happy to visit MPs' constituencies and get to know their local party officials?
Well, I think she has, but I think she's waiting for after the election. I think they're all waiting for after the election. It's almost like Rishi himself is the only one who doesn't want, let's just have a May election, let's get it out of the way, because we know which way it's going. There's no good news coming for the Conservatives. The budget isn't going to suddenly make people feel better about themselves. There's been no bounce back after that. There is nothing good coming. It's going to get worse and worse for them. And so why don't they get it out of the way? So I think they're all manoeuvring to replace him. I think it's just the timing that's in question. All the MPs I speak to, they'd rather there was a sooner election, although there are a lot of once Red Wall seats who are very worried that they won't be MPs at all. So there are other people who are joking, well, they're trying to keep hold of their salaries for as long as they can.
I've not heard. I mean, Nancy, you must speak to different Conservative MPs to me, because I don't know a single Conservative MP that wants the election to happen in May. Because there are kind of some optimistic readings that actually, when you look at where the economy is going, when you look at where jobs are, when you look at what might happen to interest rates, when you look at what growth might look like towards the end of the year, this could all be much more promising, and that's obviously quite a good thing for the country. So I think we're talking.
Do you actually think they're going to win the next election?
I didn't say that.
I'm just wondering.
I said that I've not heard this, well, let's just get it over and done with. I think there is still a really important job to do around stewarding the economy at the moment.
So no interest in having the election sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't get to decide it, but I think it was interesting that Sunak kind of ruled out this having an election on the day of the local elections, which obviously the party, would they be quite ready for that? Labour obviously seemed to think that was going to happen, but I think that has changed and hopefully dampened down some of the hysteria around the timings of the election. And the frustration with all of that is you're not then focusing on any of the policy issues that actually the public want to see action on.
And Nancy, do you think it's a realistic prospect that they would want to go for another leader before the election? I mean, the suggestion in the papers is that they're putting, the Sunday Telegraph is saying that Mordaunt's being put forward as a stalking horse for right-wing Tory rivals, so that it's a way of getting Rishi Sunak out. Do you think really that is the goal?
No, and I think... No, I don't think it is, but I've got to say, look at how that party in government has behaved. It's not been a realistic... Look, Boris came in with a massive majority. Then we had somebody in for a very short amount of time who completely destroyed everything. Then we've got Rishi. We haven't had a vote. We haven't had a say on this for a very long time. I mean, normal people who normally have a vote on who is Prime Minister. So actually, I just don't think there is any realism within the Conservative Party. I'm not quite sure that what the Prime Minister wants is the same as what the party wants, and I'm not sure the party as a whole knows what it wants. I think, let's remember, this is the party that went into Brexit to get rid of that debate once and for all, never thinking it would happen. They have made a complete mess for a very long time now. So realistically, I would say no, but also I don't think they're based in realism.
But Anita, what's the point then of putting Penny Mordaunt's name out there? What's the ultimate goal?
I think that often when it comes to the party in government, you can find 2 or 3 people that hold pretty much any view at any one time. And I think that clearly there are, according to the Sunday Telegraph, that there was some kind of meeting that took place or understood to have taken place between some prominent figures on the right and some prominent supporters of Mordaunt from days past, where they let it be known that someone like Penny they think could be a good leader. And so this could be, we could be talking about 2 people. We could be talking about 4 people. We certainly don't seem to be talking about the majority of Conservative MPs who think that actually this is a time for any change in leadership, let alone a change in Penny Mordaunt, to Penny Mordaunt.
But 2 people can cook up a plot, though, can they?
I mean, they can brief that they've cooked up a plot, right? And they can make front pages with it. But whether or not that changes the political weather, I think the thing that's really striking is most of the kind of prominent figures that you have seen who might agitate in the past have come out quite publicly and said this is ridiculous. And I think that is actually quite meaningful in this context.
Bonkers, to be precise, is what they've said. The Express throwing Nigel Farage into the mix, Nancy.
Talking about bonkers. Yes,
you said that, not me.
I did indeed. I mean, this is actually interesting. So one of our local newspapers, Mansfield and Ashfield Chad, we know quite well what happens when MPs move across to reform. And obviously, there were comments last week by the Conservative who wasn't then Conservative and then suddenly became Reform, that there's going to be a tsunami of people following him. Now, I'm not convinced that is true. A tsunami is a very strong word, but I actually do think that Reform, I hate to say it, but I think Reform, when Farage comes back, this talks about him dusting off his big mouth. I think he will win votes again. And he's winning votes because the politicians who are supposed to be leaders are so poor that people are still looking desperately around for people who are saying the right things. And I think that will cause even more trouble for the Conservatives. But I think they sadly will win lots of votes.
Anita, your predictions for Reform UK?
Well, it's very unclear here how the Brexit champion, as they describe it in the Sunday Express, is going to turn up. It doesn't say that he's going to be the leader again, although it does quite carefully say that Richard Tice doesn't care about titles. And Farage remains, I think, their honorary president. So I think there is a question, and I think it's actually quite plausible. The Express says that a lot of people may not have heard of Reform or may not have the profile that it could, like the UKIP and Brexit Party had, because they lack Farage. And so, like, that could change things. But it's interesting that Farage has, for quite a consistent period of time, in spite of being courted quite vigorously by Richard Tice, has not wanted to kind of enter the fray and enter the front line again. But I think that actually Reform has, relatively speaking, underperformed UKIP and the Brexit Party when you look at where they were positioned. So I think it will be interesting to see if Farage does come back and also if it does catapult Reform into a more central position in the conversation.
Yes, they're saying that he would lead the election charge, but haven't sort of given a title. But it's interesting, not so long ago we were talking about him potentially joining the Tories, weren't we? There were murmurings around that.
Mostly from him, but yeah.
Yes, that's true. The Times, quite serious, Grant Shapps has had to cut short a visit to Ukraine because there was some intelligence that there was a credible threat to him, Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly serious. So they believe, the British intelligence believed that the credible threat was it could be targeted by a Russian missile strike. You don't get much more serious than that. And they clearly... they had the intelligence, they believed it was going to happen. It comes on the back of Putin advancing on the Eastern Front, all the threats that he's made. I mean, we were talking the other day, he was threatening earlier this week, about, I may well use nuclear weapons. And it's almost become background noise, but it's not background noise, is it? This is a man who has got the power to do that if he wanted to. And the whole sort of American debate, the money being stuck so that Ukraine is not getting the help that it needs to fight back. And here we are with potentially UK high-profile politicians allegedly being a very high target.
Yeah, Anita, a reminder, lest we need it, that the war is still very real.
Yes.
In Ukraine.
And we had a situation with Zelensky and the Greek Prime Minister, Mitsotakis, that was where they had a near miss with a missile that was, really quite close to their motorcade and killed 5 people. So I think 2 elements of this is really important. Obviously, Greece being a member of NATO, that would have been quite a significant shift in the dynamic that could see most of Europe in war as a result of this. And also, as Nancy says, the kind of the stall and stalemate that's happening over that $60 billion package from the US doesn't just matter in and of itself, but also it's a signal of Western unity and Western intent. And I think as that starts to, or potentially starts to fracture, especially if Putin feels empowered following the elections that are taking place in Russia today, then we could see this shift to a new game, particularly as Ukraine are sadly kind of stalling in their offensive.
OK. Anita and Nancy, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we'll look at whether we might soon know more about the Princess of Wales's health when we come back. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Nancy Fielder and Anita Boateng. Let's take a look at the Observer front page. And this story, quite alarming regarding Meta, and a leading psychologist who advises Meta on suicide prevention and self-harm. She's quit her role because she's accusing the tech giant of turning a blind eye to harmful content on Instagram, repeatedly ignoring expert advice and prioritising profit over lives. Nancy?
Yeah, this is a quite devastating story for any parent who has a child who is obsessed with their phone on social media, which is absolutely all of us, let's be honest. And she's an insider. She worked with them, advised them, tried to help them for 3 years, and she's basically quit, as you said, saying they only care about money and they don't take the photos down. And what is so worrying, it's just such a powerful force that all our children have in their hands. And this makes it sound like they are deliberately, if you're sort of following the thread of any theme, they deliberately feed you that information. And we all know that because we all get that ourselves on social media at whatever age. But actually, if that's about suicide and if that's about self-harm, well, we've seen in inquests that ends up with children killing themselves. And the fact that we've known about this for a while, and now we've got an insider saying it, she's so annoyed she's quit, and yet who can hold them to account? They are so powerful, so rich, and in all our lives, all the time.
Anita, this is incredibly damning, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is, actually. I think she talks quite a lot, not just about... It's not the sort of the idea that they aren't doing anything, but she says the ultimate agenda is about interaction, right? And a lot of apps are really engineered towards having people stay on the platform for as long as possible. And I think that what she is implying here is that is hindering their efforts to remove some of the damaging content, which is particularly impacting young women and girls, she says in particular here. So I think that presumably was part of her focus. So it's the question of, like, how do you balance the priorities that she sees as being much more commercial with their broader duty to society and particularly to young people that she mentions who are at a vulnerable state and are potentially viewing this kind of content.
Yeah, I just want to read out a response from Meta, so I think it's important to hear their line. And they say that suicide and self-harm are complex issues and we take them incredibly seriously. We've consulted with safety experts, including those in our suicide and self-harm advisory group, for many years, and their feedback has helped us continue to make significant progress in this space. Most recently, we announced we'll hide content that discusses suicide and self-harm from teens, even if shared by someone they follow, one of many updates we've made after thoughtful discussion with our advisors. Does that allay your fears, Nancy?
No, and the direct quote from this insider is, on the surface, it seems like they care, and they are very good at the PR game. But any of us can take our children's phone and go down these rabbit holes and experience this for ourselves. And I just think it's something that's so serious, they are so powerful. If they wanted to, they could get rid of this. I have no doubt about that. I'm not saying they're not taking steps, but they're not doing the urgent, absolutely necessary action that they could do at a click of a finger. Yeah.
I think there is one component of this that's quite complicated, which is referenced in that piece, which is that I do think that suicide and complexities around mental health have a multiplicity of factors. And I think sometimes we have had conversations about vulnerable people, and particularly in the context of people losing their lives, that is focused solely on social media, as if there were no phenomenons of societal pressure and bullying and all the other components that young people have to deal with at an early age. And building resilience in young people and helping them to manage and monitor their use is also equally as important. And I think that sometimes we get sort of stuck in the idea that, like, there's one thing that would fix this. If we look at what happened during the pandemic, for instance, of course, social media was a factor, but lack of social interaction was, a huge thing for lots of young people. So I think that whether it's education, whether it's parents, whether it's technology companies, I think there's a lot that all sides could actually do to really build resilience in young people.
That's very true, but this is one that's easily solvable. They have the power to solve that, and it is just an element. You're absolutely right. But I think they could do more, and they have got the money to do it if they wanted to.
Yeah, OK. Let's have a final look at the Sunday Times and this story about the Princess of Wales. Expected to speak about her recovery. We've only got about 30 seconds.
Expected to. It's a royal source who says that she may at some point when she reappears again. I don't think it's particularly likely. It would be great if she wanted to at some point, but there doesn't seem a whole amount of basis behind it, I don't think.
I actually think they did this in order to kind of help dampen down the speculation of, you are going to find out something real at some point, so please get off social media and get off TikTok doing your, your conspiracy videos. So who knows what we actually will find out, but it feels like it's sort of a, everyone calm down, yes. You are going to find out more.
Damage limitation.
It won't work.
Well. OK, Nancy and Anita, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. We shall see you in the next hour.